The meeting hall on Nexus Prime Station stretched across 300 meters of polished crystal and metal. 7 species sat in their designated sections, their forms varying from the towering insect-like to the floating energy beings called the lumens. At the center podium stood Ambassador, a human in his formal black uniform with gold trim. His dark hair was graying at the temples, and his hands gripped the edges of the podium as he waited for the council to settle. The year was 2847, and this was the most important day in human history. Earth wanted full membership in the Galactic Council. After 200 years of peace on there and 50 years of cooperation with alien species, humans believed they were ready to join the galaxy's governing body. But first, they had to hear the archivists. The archivists were old, not just old in years, but old in purpose. They had existed for millions of years, watching civilizations rise and fall. They recorded everything. They forgot nothing. 3 of them floated into the chamber, their bodies wrapped in flowing robes that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states. Their faces, if they could be called faces, showed no emotion. The lead archivist's voice echoed through the chamber without coming from any visible mouth. "We have completed our study of humanity. The Council requested our findings before the vote on full membership. We will now present our report." Felt his stomach tighten. He had read preliminary reports. He knew what was coming. "Humanity," the archivist began, "is unique among the 6,000 species we have documented. They possess a combination of traits we have never observed together in a single species. First, they adapt at a rate that exceeds normal evolutionary patterns. They can survive in environments that would kill most species within hours. Second, they innovate in warfare at a pace we find alarming. Their entire technological advancement has been driven primarily by military conflict." The archivist paused, and a holographic display appeared above the chamber. It showed images from Earth's history, armies clashing with swords, cities burning under aerial bombardment, mushroom clouds rising over destroyed landscapes. "Third," the archivist continued, "humans display extreme emotional volatility. They can form bonds of loyalty that last lifetimes, but they can also harbor grudges that span generations. They forgive the unforgivable and they punish the trivial. We cannot predict their behavior with any certainty." Watched the council members. Some leaned forward with interest. Others looked concerned. The representative clicked her mandibles together in what he had learned was a sign of worry. "Most concerning," the archivist said, "is their relationship with self-destruction. Humans are the only species we have documented to have nearly destroyed themselves not once, not twice, but 3 times before achieving space flight. They created weapons capable of ending all life on their planet and came within hours of using them on multiple occasions. They poisoned their own atmosphere. They depleted their resources to the point of global collapse. And each time they survived and rebuilt, only to repeat the pattern." The holographic display showed more images: nuclear missiles in silos, chemical weapons being deployed, oceans choked with plastic and oil. "Our recommendation," the archivist concluded, "is that humanity be granted provisional membership only, with strict monitoring and intervention protocols. We do not fear what humans will do to other species. We fear what they will do to themselves when they have the resources of multiple worlds at their disposal. Give them the galaxy as a playground, and they will turn it into a battlefield. Give them time, and they will destroy themselves in ways we cannot imagine." Silence fell over the chamber. Felt every eye turned toward him. This was his moment to respond, to defend his species, to convince the council that humanity had changed. He stepped forward and began to speak. His voice was calm and measured, carrying the weight of 200 years of peace. "The archivists are correct about our past," he said. "We do not deny our history. We were violent, we were destructive. We nearly ended ourselves multiple times, but that is the key word, were, past tense." He gestured to the holographic display, and it changed to show modern Earth. Green forests had reclaimed old industrial zones. The oceans were clean. Cities gleamed with solar panels and vertical gardens. For 2 centuries, we have had no wars on Earth, not a single armed conflict. We dismantled our nuclear weapons. We cleaned our oceans. We healed our world. And when we met you, when we discovered we were not alone in the universe, we chose cooperation over conquest. We have honored every treaty. We have shared our technology freely. We have asked for nothing except the chance to prove ourselves. Look directly at the archivists. You say you fear what we will do to ourselves, but have you considered what we have already done? We looked at our own reflection and we didn't like what we saw, so we changed. That is the most human thing of all. We adapt. We learn. We improve. Yes, we have the capacity for violence, but we also have the capacity for redemption. The council members whispered among themselves in dozens of languages and methods of communication. Chairman Vin of the Empire stood. They were a warrior race themselves, though they had been peaceful for 5,000 years. Vin was tall and muscular, with blue skin marked by ceremonial scars. "I have read the archivist report," Vin said, "and I have spent the last 5 years studying humanity directly. I have visited Earth. I have spoken with their leaders and their common citizens. What I see is a species that has learned from their mistakes. The archivists warn us about the past, but I believe we should judge humanity by their present and their potential future." He turned to face the other council members. "My own species was once as violent as humans. We conquered 17 worlds before we learned the futility of war. It took us 3,000 years to reach enlightenment. Humans achieved it in 200. I propose we grant them full membership with no restrictions. Let us welcome them as equals." The vote was called. One by one, the council members cast their votes. They voted yes. The lumens voted yes. The crystalline architects voted yes. 4 more species voted yes. Only the archivists voted no. The final count was 6-1. Humanity had 1 full membership. Felt tears in his eyes as the council chamber erupted in various forms of celebration. Vin descended from his platform and extended his hand in the human gesture he had learned, shook it firmly. "Welcome to the council, Ambassador," Vin said with a smile. As the celebration continued, the lead archivist floated silently out of the chamber. Before leaving, it turned back one final time and spoke, though no one was listening anymore. "We do not fear what humans will do to us," it said quietly. "We fear what they will do to themselves when they have the stars as a battlefield. This vote will be remembered. This warning will be forgotten. And in time, the galaxy will learn why we study history. Those who do not learn from the past are doomed to repeat it." The archivist left. The warning was recorded in the official archives of the session. And then, as the archivist had predicted, it was forgotten. 50 years passed like water flowing down a mountain. The year was now 2897, and humanity had exploded across the stars like seeds scattered by a strong wind. 147 colony worlds now flew the flag of the United Earth Coalition. Massive transport ships carried millions of people to new homes every year. Mining operations stripped asteroids of valuable resources. Farming colonies produced food for billions. Captain Bin stood on the bridge of the UEC Indomitable, watching the stars through the massive. He was 32 years old, born on Mars, and had never actually set foot on Earth. His uniform was crisp and clean. His face was young but already showed the lines of stress that came with command. The Indomitable was a destroyer-class vessel, 400 meters long and equipped with enough firepower to level a small moon. His mission was simple: patrol the outer colonies, keep the peace, show Earth's flag in distant systems. It was boring work most days, but Bin didn't mind boring. Boring meant peaceful. Boring meant no one was dying. "Captain," his communication officer called out, "we're receiving a message from the transport ship Morning Star. They're requesting immediate assistance." Bin turned. "What's their situation?" "They're being boarded by coalition inspectors. The captain says the inspection is illegal and excessive. She's asking for intervention. Bin frowned. He knew about the new inspection protocols. Earth had implemented them 6 months ago, claiming they needed to prevent smuggling and ensure proper resource allocation. The outer colonies had protested loudly. They said the inspections were just an excuse for Earth to steal their profits. "Tell them we're on our way," Bin said. "But we're there to observe only, not to intervene unless absolutely necessary." The Indomitable changed course and accelerated toward the Morning Star's position. It took 3 hours to reach them. When they arrived, Bin saw the transport ship hanging in space with 2 Coalition patrol craft attached to its hull like parasites. The Morning Star was a civilian vessel designed to carry cargo and passengers. It had no weapons, no shields. It was completely helpless. "Hail them," Bin ordered. The face that appeared on his screen was not the transport captain. It was a Coalition inspector, a woman named with cold eyes and a thin smile. "Captain Bin, there's no need for your presence here. This is a routine inspection." The transport captain requested assistance, Bin said carefully. "I'm here to ensure everything is conducted properly." "Everything is proper," said. The Morning Star refused to open their cargo holds. They refused to provide documentation. They refused to submit to legal authority. "Under Coalition law, we have every right to board and inspect by force." "Under Coalition law," a new voice broke in. It was the transport captain, a woman named Mi-sun who Bin had met once before at a colony station. Her face appeared in a split screen next to the inspector. "Under Coalition law, inspections must be conducted at designated checkpoints, not in open space. You have no authority here." "The law changed 3 months ago," said coldly. "Perhaps you didn't receive the notification in the outer colonies, or perhaps you ignored it." Bin watched the argument escalate. He checked his database and confirmed that yes, the law had changed. Earth's central government had granted inspection teams the authority to stop and search any vessel anywhere in human space. The outer colonies had filed protests, but protests didn't change laws. "Captain," his tactical officer said quietly, "I'm detecting weapons charging on the patrol craft." Bin's blood went cold. "What type of weapons?" "Point defense lasers, sir. Those are anti-ship weapons. They're not for inspections, they're for combat." Before Bin could respond, the inspector's voice came through again. "Morning Star, this is your final warning. Open your cargo holds or we will fire on your engines and board you by force." "You wouldn't dare," Mi-sun said. "There are 2,000 people on this ship, families, children. You can't." The patrol craft fired. The lasers struck the Morning Star's engines in precise, calculated bursts, but something went wrong. Bin watched in horror as the engine core destabilized. Alarms blared across every communication channel. The inspector's face showed shock and then fear. "Evacuate," Mi-sun screamed. "Everyone to the escape pods now." But there wasn't time. The engine core breached. The explosion was brilliant and terrible, a small sun being born and dying in the span of seconds. When it faded, the Morning Star was gone. So were the 2 patrol craft that had been attached to it, and so were the 2,000 people who had been aboard. The bridge of the Indomitable was silent. Bin stared at the debris field, his mind refusing to accept what he had just witnessed. His sister worked on civilian transports, ships just like the Morning Star. She could have been on that ship. "Sir," his communication officer said, her voice shaking, "we're receiving a priority message from Mars. It's Governor 1. He's requesting to speak with you directly." Governor 1's face appeared on the screen. He was an old man, 70 years old, with white hair and eyes that burned with fury. "Captain Bin," he said, "I assume you witnessed the massacre." "It was an accident," Bin said, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. "It was murder," one said flatly, "and it will not stand. The Outer Colonies Council has held an emergency session. We are declaring independence from the United Earth Coalition effective immediately. We will no longer submit to Earth's tyranny. We will no longer allow our people to be murdered for refusing inspections. We are free colonies and we will defend ourselves. Governor, please, Ben said. Don't do this. We can negotiate. We can find a peaceful solution. The time for negotiation ended when Earth fired on civilian vessels, one said. Choose your side carefully, Captain. You were born on Mars. You're one of us. Don't let Earth turn you into their weapon. The transmission ended. Ben sat in his captain's chair, his mind racing. Within an hour, he received new orders from Earth Command. The outer colonies were in rebellion. All military personnel were to report to their assigned battle stations. Lethal force was authorized against any colonial vessel that refused to submit to coalition authority. The fracture had become a war in less than a day. Ben thought about his sister. He thought about the 2,000 people who had died. He thought about Governor One's words, choose your side. But what if there was no right side? What if this was just humans doing what they had always done best? Destroying each other. On Earth, Ambassador stood before an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The alien species watched with concern as she explained the situation. This is an internal matter, she said firmly. We request that the Council not interfere. We will resolve this conflict quickly and peacefully. On Mars, colonial representatives stood before the same council minutes later in a separate transmission. This is an internal matter, he said, using the exact same words. We request that the council not interfere. We will resolve this conflict on our terms. The council members looked at each other in confusion and concern, but they agreed. This was a human matter. Let the humans handle it themselves. Chairman Vin, now much older than when he had welcomed humanity to the council, felt a cold weight in his chest. He thought about the archivist warning from 50 years ago, the warning he had dismissed, the warning that now seemed like prophecy. But it was too late to do anything about it. The war had begun. 6 months after the first shot was fired, the human civil war had become something the galaxy had never seen before. The death toll had already reached 15 billion. 15 billion human lives ended in half a year. The numbers were so large that they stopped meaning anything. They were just numbers on reports, statistics in databases. Captain Ben now commanded the dreadnought UEC Unbroken, a massive warship 3 kilometers long with enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. He stood on the bridge, exhausted and hollow. This was his third crew. The first crew had died at the Battle of Jupiter Station. The second crew had died when a colonial suicide bomber had hidden among refugees and detonated themselves inside the ship's hangar bay. The third crew knew they were just as temporary as the first two. Colonial fleet detected, his tactical officer reported. Distance, 200,000 kilometers. Composition, 37 capital ships, 115 destroyers, and unknown number of smaller craft. Admiral is commanding. Ben felt his stomach tighten at the name. Admiral had become famous, or perhaps infamous, throughout human space. He was a tactical genius, someone who seemed to predict every move his enemies would make. Had destroyed more coalition ships than any other colonial commander. And now he was here at Titan's Gate, the last defensive position before Earth itself. All ships' battle stations, Ben ordered. This is not a drill. We hold this position. If we fail, they reach Earth. If they reach Earth, 50 billion people die. We cannot fail. The coalition fleet consisted of 42 capital ships and 140 destroyers. On paper, they had the advantage. But Ben had learned not to trust paper. Paper didn't account for determination. Paper didn't account for desperation. Paper didn't account for the fact that both sides would rather die than surrender. The battle began with long-range missile exchanges. Thousands of missiles streaked through space, their drives creating trails of light against the darkness. Point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. Ships on both sides exploded. Ben watched 3 of his destroyers disappear from his tactical display in the first 2 minutes. Colonial fleet closing to combat range, his tactical officer said. They're not slowing down. They're trying to get in close where our numerical advantage means less, Ben said. All ships maintain formation. Focus fire on their capital ships. The 2 fleets collided like ancient armies meeting on a battlefield. Laser beams cut through hulls. Rounds punched holes through armor. Ships rammed into each other when they had no other options left. The space around Titan's Gate became a graveyard. On the colonial flagship Revolution, Admiral watched his tactical display with calm eyes. He was 45 years old, with short black hair and a face that showed no emotion. Around him, his crew worked frantically to keep the ship functioning as coalition fire pounded their shields. The Unbroken is their command ship, his tactical officer said. Captain Ben is commanding. If we take it out, their formation will collapse. I know, said quietly. Focus all forward batteries on the Unbroken. Ram them if we have to. Sir, ramming a dreadnought with our flagship would be suicide. I'm aware of that, said, but if we don't stop them here, they'll push through to the colonies. My children are on Mars. My parents are on New Europa. I will not let the coalition reach them. Do you understand? The tactical officer nodded. Yes, sir, ramming course plotted. But before they could execute, a new alarm blared. More ships were arriving. A 3rd fleet had just dropped out of FTL. For a moment, both sides stopped firing, confused about who the newcomers were. Then Ben saw the insignia on the ships. His blood turned to ice. Those are Galactic Council vessels. They're intervening. 10,000 ships of the Galactic Peacekeeping Armada spread out across the battlefield. Their ships were beautiful, elegant things built for show as much as function. The galaxy had been at peace for 800 years. They had forgotten what real war looked like. A broadcast came through on all frequencies. A young officer appeared on every screen. This is Admiral Vin of the Galactic Peacekeeping Armada. We have been authorized by the Council to enforce an immediate ceasefire. Both human fleets will power down weapons and submit to galactic authority. You have 1 hour to comply. Ben looked at his communication officer. Get me Admiral, direct line, now. It took 30 seconds, but's face appeared on a private channel. The 2 men looked at each other for the first time. They were enemies. They had been trying to kill each other for 6 months, but in that moment they understood each other perfectly. They have no right to be here, said. Agreed, Ben said. This is a human matter. If we both attack them, said slowly, they'll be caught between 2 fleets. We'd have to coordinate our assault, Ben said. Trust each other not to fire on each other during the attack. Can we trust each other? Asked. Ben thought about his sister, still somewhere in this war. He thought about the 2,000 people who had died on the Morning Star. He thought about every human who had died because other humans had decided to fight. And now aliens were coming to their space, telling them what to do, threatening them with force. I'm human before I'm coalition, Ben said finally. Are you human before you're colonial? Always, said. Then let's show them why they should have stayed away. Both fleets turned toward the Galactic Armada. On Earth and Mars, on every colony and station, the same decision was being made. Humans didn't agree on much. They fought each other constantly, but they would not accept alien intervention. This was their war, their tragedy, their right to fight. The broadcast came simultaneously from both fleets. Galactic Armada, you have entered human space without permission during an internal conflict. You have 1 hour to leave. If you do not leave, we will consider it an act of war, and we will respond accordingly. Young Admiral Vin stared at his screen in disbelief. They can't be serious. They're already at war with each other. They're exhausted. They've lost almost half their forces. They can't possibly think they can fight us too. His second officer, a named, clicked her mandibles nervously. Sir, I recommend we withdraw. The archivists warned about this. Humans don't think logically when cornered. We have 10,000 ships, Vin said. They have less than 200 combined. The math is simple, they'll back down. But what if they don't? Asked. Vin didn't answer. He didn't have to, because at that moment both human fleets opened fire. The Battle of Titan's Gate expanded into something unprecedented. The Galactic Armada had more ships, but they had never fought a real war. Their tactics were 800 years old, learned from textbooks and simulations. The humans had been fighting each other for 6 months. They had learned and adapted and evolved their tactics with every battle. Engineer aboard the Coalition vessel Defiant watched his ship take critical damage. The hull was breached. The engines were failing. The crew was evacuating. But he had an idea, a terrible idea born from desperation. The FTL drive was still functional, and if he could overload it, the resulting explosion would be massive. He keyed his communicator. "Captain, I can turn our FTL drive into a bomb. Point us at their command carrier and evacuate the crew. I'll stay behind and trigger it manually." "No," his captain said. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," said calmly. "Tell my daughter I love her." He shut off the communicator before his captain could argue. 3 minutes later, the Defiant accelerated toward the Galactic command carrier at maximum speed. At the last second, overloaded the FTL drive. The explosion was so bright that it could be seen from Earth. The command carrier and 4 other galactic ships near it simply ceased to exist. On the colonial ship Revenge, Scientist I had the same idea at almost the same moment. When her ship was crippled, she did the same thing had done. Another massive explosion. Another galactic command carrier destroyed. The tactics spread through both fleets like wildfire. Damaged ships became weapons. Desperate crews became suicide bombers. It was horrific. It was effective. And it was something the Galactic Armada had never encountered before. "They're insane," Admiral Vin shouted as he watched his fleet being destroyed around him. "They're using their own ships as missiles." "Sir, we need to retreat," urged. "We've already lost 3,000 ships. This was supposed to be a peacekeeping mission." "We can't retreat," Vin said. "If we retreat, the Council will look weak. The galaxy will." An explosion rocked his flagship. Alarms blared, the lights flickered, grabbed Vin's arm. "Sir, we have to evacuate, the ship is lost." They made it to an escape pod. As they rocketed away from their dying flagship, Vin watched the battle through the small viewport. Human ships, some barely functional, continued fighting with a determination that terrified him. They fought the galactic fleet. They fought each other. They fought reality itself, refusing to accept defeat even when defeat was mathematically certain. 3 weeks later, the battle finally ended. The Galactic Peacekeeping Armada was gone. Every single ship destroyed or captured. 10,000 vessels. Hundreds of thousands of personnel. Admiral Vin had died in the fighting when his escape pod was hit by debris. The human fleets had lost 80% of their remaining forces. Captain Bin's Unbroken was one of the few coalition ships still functioning. Admiral's Revolution was crippled but alive. On Nexus Prime, Chairman Vin received the news of his son's death in silence. Around him, the Galactic Council sat in stunned disbelief. The archivists floated in their section, saying nothing. Finally, the lead archivist spoke. "We told you. We warned you 50 years ago, but you didn't listen. You thought humanity had changed. You thought 200 years of peace meant they had evolved beyond their nature, but you were wrong. Humans are most dangerous when they fight each other, because they learn, they adapt, they innovate in warfare at a pace you cannot comprehend. You sent 10,000 ships to stop them. They destroyed every single one while fighting a civil war at the same time." The archivist paused, then added quietly, "And this is them weakened and divided. Imagine what they would do if they ever united." The council chamber was silent. In that silence, every species present learned the same lesson. The warning had been overlooked. The price had been paid in blood, and the human civil war was still not over. The war continued. It had been 3 years since the Morning Star exploded. 3 years of fighting. 3 years of dying. Humanity's population had dropped from 400 billion to 180 billion. More than half the species dead. Dozens of colony worlds were now uninhabitable, their surfaces by biological weapons, swarms, or worse things that had been created in desperation. Earth itself had been bombed from orbit twice. The beautiful blue world that Ambassador had shown the Council 53 years ago was now covered in gray clouds of ash and smoke. Millions had died in the bombardments. Millions more had died from starvation and disease when the supply chains collapsed. Captain Bin sat in what used to be the captain's chair of the Unbroken. The chair was damaged, half melted from a fire that had killed his 3rd crew. He was on his 4th crew now, or maybe his 5th. He had stopped counting. The faces changed so often that he barely learned their names anymore. "Sir," his communication officer said, "we're receiving a transmission. It's Admiral. He wants to speak with you directly." Bin felt something twist in his chest. He and had been trying to kill each other for 3 years. They had fought at Titan's Gate, at the Battle of Venus, at New Europa, at a dozen nameless points in space. Both men had lost everything. Bin's entire family was dead. His parents killed in the Earth bombardment. His sister killed when her refugee transport was attacked by colonial fighters who thought it was carrying military supplies. "Put him through," Bin said quietly. Admiral's face appeared on the screen. He looked like Bin felt, exhausted, hollow, old beyond his years. Was only 48, but he looked 70. His hair had gone completely gray. His face was covered in scars. "Captain Bin," said. His voice was rough, like he had been screaming and could barely talk anymore. "I'm tired." "I know," Bin said. "So am I." "I've lost both my children," said. "My son died at Titan's Gate. My daughter died last month when the Coalition bombed Mars. My wife took her own life a year ago. She couldn't take it anymore. The grief, the war, all of it." Bin said nothing. What could he say? He had lost everyone too. "I wanted to win," continued. "I wanted to defeat the Coalition. I wanted to prove that the colonies deserved freedom. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what I was fighting for. Now I'm just fighting because I don't know how to stop." "We're the same," Bin said. "I don't even remember what we're fighting about anymore. Resources, taxes, political control, does it matter? Everyone I cared about is dead. Everyone you cared about is dead, and we're still fighting." Was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What if we stopped?" "What?" "What if we just stopped fighting, you and me, right here, right now? What if we called a ceasefire?" "We don't have the authority," Bin said. "We're just military officers. We follow orders." "We have ships," said. "We have guns. We have the power to destroy planets. I think that gives us plenty of authority." Bin felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. It was a tiny, fragile thing, but it was there. "What do you propose?" "I'll contact Governor 1, said. "You contact whoever is running Earth now. I think it's President Han, but I'm not sure. The government keeps changing because people keep dying. We tell them we're done fighting. We arrange a meeting, neutral ground, and we end this war." "They'll call us traitors," Bin said. "They'll call us heroes if it works," said. "And if it doesn't work, we'll be dead anyway, so who cares what they call us?" Despite everything, Bin smiled. It felt strange on his face. He hadn't smiled in so long. "All right," he said. "Let's end this war." The message went out simultaneously to Earth and Mars. The two most famous military commanders in human space were calling for peace. Within hours, the fighting began to slow. Crews on both sides were exhausted. They wanted it to end. When their captains told them a ceasefire was coming, many simply put down their weapons and cried. Her name was on the list of the dead, but her legacy lived on. Before she died, she had been running the largest civilian refugee fleet in human space, saving people from both sides of the war. The people she saved remembered her. They spoke her name with respect. And when the ceasefire was announced, they volunteered to help make it happen. One of his former assistants, a young woman named Na, contacted both fleets. "I know where you can meet," she said. "The archivists have offered their station as neutral ground. Both sides will be safe there. The archivists don't take sides, they just watch and record." The meeting was arranged for 2 weeks later. During those 2 weeks, the fighting stopped. Not everywhere. There were still scattered battles as some commanders refused to accept the ceasefire, but most of the shooting stopped. For the first time in 3 years, humans weren't actively trying to kill each other. Governor One arrived at the archivist station first. He was 83 now, kept alive by medical technology that should have failed years ago. He looked like a skeleton wrapped in skin, but his eyes were still sharp. President Han arrived an hour later. She was young, only 35, chosen for leadership because everyone older than her had died. She had been a teacher before the war. Now she was responsible for 50 billion lives. The archivists hosted them in a simple room with a round table. There were no weapons allowed, no guards, just humans talking to other humans, trying to find a way to stop killing each other. "I don't want to be here," one said as the meeting started. "I don't want to negotiate with people who bombed Mars and killed millions of my people." "And I don't want to negotiate with people who attacked Earth," Han said coldly. "But here we are, because if we don't stop this war, there won't be any humans left to save." They talked for 6 hours that first day. They screamed at each other. They blamed each other. They cried, but they didn't leave, they kept talking. On the second day, Dr. Mi from the colonies and Dr. Ho from Earth arrived. Both were scientists. Both had created weapons during the war. Mi had designed the weapon that had destroyed New Horizon Colony. Ho had created the biological weapon that had been used on Mars. They met in a hallway between sessions. They looked at each other, and they both knew what the other had done. "I've killed billions," Mi said quietly. "With my weapon. I thought I was helping. I thought I was saving lives by ending the war faster, but I just created new ways to die." "I know," Ho said. "I did the same thing. I told myself it was necessary, that it was for the greater good. But now I can't sleep because I see their faces, all the people who died because of what I created." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Mi said, "What if we used our knowledge to save people instead? What if we developed decontamination protocols, ways to clean the planets we poisoned?" "It would take years," Ho said, "maybe decades." "But it's something," Mi said. "It's better than creating more weapons." They shook hands, two enemies becoming allies because they were tired of creating death. The negotiations took 3 weeks, but finally, on the 21st day, an agreement was reached. The ceasefire would become permanent. The United Earth Coalition and the Outer Colonies Council would reunify, but with new laws that gave colonies more autonomy. Resources would be shared more fairly. And most importantly, both sides would work together to rebuild what they had destroyed. The treaty was signed by Governor One, President Han, Captain Bin, and Admiral. As they signed, the archivists recorded everything. The lead archivist spoke to them after the signing. "You have done something rare," it said. "You have chosen peace when violence was easier. You have chosen to rebuild when destruction was simpler. But you must understand, the galaxy will never forget what happened here. You fought yourselves with a brutality that shocked even the oldest species. You destroyed a peacekeeping armada while fighting a civil war. You created weapons that will haunt this galaxy for generations." "We know," Bin said quietly. "We'll live with that shame for the rest of our lives." "Shame is good," the archivist said. "Shame means you remember. Shame means you learned. The galaxy feared you would forget, that you would repeat this pattern. But if you remember, if you teach your children what you did and why it must never happen again, then perhaps this tragedy will have meaning." The treaty was broadcast across all human space. The war was over. After 3 years of fighting, 220 billion human lives lost, and the destruction of countless worlds, the humans had finally stopped fighting themselves. The galaxy watched and learned. The warning had been overlooked, the price had been paid, and now perhaps the lesson would be remembered. 20 years passed. The scars remained, but they were beginning to heal. Earth's skis were slowly clearing as terraforming technology removed the ash and smoke. Mars had been rebuilt, its domed cities larger and more beautiful than before. The destroyed colonies were either being reclaimed or abandoned as monuments to remind people of what had been lost. Captain Bin was no longer a captain. He was Admiral Bin now, retired from active service but still respected throughout human space. He was 52 years old and he looked every day of it. His hair was completely white. His face was lined with wrinkles, but his eyes were clear. He stood on the observation deck of a new station orbiting Earth, looking down at the planet below. In a few hours, there would be a ceremony, a memorial service for all those who had died in the war. 20 years had passed, but humans hadn't forgotten. They would never forget. Admiral Bin, a voice said behind him. He turned to see Admiral walking toward him. Looked old too, but there was peace in his face that hadn't been there during the war. Had spent the last 20 years working with Dr. Me and Dr. Ho, developing ways to clean the poisoned worlds. It was slow work, but it was important work. Bin said, smiling, they embraced like old friends. In a way they were. They had fought each other. They had tried to kill each other. But they had also ended the war together. That created a bond stronger than friendship. "Are you ready for the ceremony?" asked. "No," Bin admitted. "I don't think I'll ever be ready to face what we did, but I'll go anyway. We owe them that much." They walked to the ceremony together. Thousands of people were already gathered in the massive hall. Representatives from every human world were present, and standing among them were representatives from the Galactic Council. Chairman Vin's daughter, Lee, represented the. She was young, but she carried herself with the same dignity her father had shown before his death. She approached Bin and they exchanged respectful bows. "My father spoke of you before he died," Lee said. "He said that humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy, but he also said you were capable of great wisdom when you chose to be. I hope he was right about the second part." "So do we," Bin said quietly. The ceremony began. Names were read, 220 billion names. It would take years to read them all, so they read a representative sample. 1,000 names from each world, young and old, military and civilian, coalition and colonial. They were all equal in death. Dr. Me and Dr. Ho stood together on the stage, presenting their progress on planetary reclamation. New Horizon, the colony that had been destroyed by Me's weapon, would be habitable again in 50 years. It was a long time, but it was progress. After the ceremony, a group of young people approached Bin and they were the generation born during the war, now in their 20s. Their leader was a young man named Young. He had been born in a refugee camp during the siege of Mars. His parents had died in the fighting. He had been raised by a refugee network. "We want you to know something," Young said to the two admirals. "We've learned about what happened. We've studied the war in school. We've seen the recordings. And we want you to know that we won't let it happen again. Never again. That's what we've been taught. That's what we believe." Bin felt tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "That's all we can ask, that you remember, that you learn, that you don't repeat our mistakes." A young woman named stepped forward. She was Niece, the daughter of his brother who had died early in the war. "My aunt believed that humans were capable of great things," said. "She died believing that. She died trying to save people from both sides of the war. I want to honor her by continuing her work, by showing the galaxy that we can be better." "Then do it," said. "Build something better than what we destroyed. Create something beautiful from the ashes. That's the only way to give meaning to all those deaths." The Galactic Council had learned its lesson too. A new protocol had been established. Humans would govern themselves with no interference. A quarantine zone of 500 light-years surrounded human space, not to keep humans in, but to give the galaxy space to feel safe. The archivists attended the ceremony, floating silently in their designated area. After it ended, the lead archivist approached Ben and, "We have updated our records," it said. "The warning has been modified. It now reads, humanity is dangerous to themselves and others, but they are also capable of learning from their mistakes. They paid a terrible price for their lesson. Let us hope they remember it. Let us hope the galaxy never forgets." "We won't forget," Ben promised. "How could we? Every colony, every station, every world has memorials like this. We've made remembering part of our culture. Our children learn about the war before they learn to read. We've turned our shame into education." "Good," the archivist said, "because civilizations that forget their history are doomed to repeat it. You have written your history in blood. Now write your future in wisdom." The years continued to pass. Ben lived to be 87, long enough to see Mars fully rebuilt and New Horizon declared habitable again. Lived to be 90, working on planetary reclamation until his final days. Dr. Me and Dr. Ho became celebrated figures, showing that people could change from destroyers to healers. The generation born during the war grew up and had children of their own. Young became a teacher, educating people about the war and why it must never happen again. Continued work with refugees, helping people displaced by conflicts across the galaxy. Humanity continued to expand into space, but more carefully now, more thoughtfully. They built their colonies with an eye toward sustainability and peace. When conflicts arose, they remembered the war. They remembered the 220 billion dead, and they found peaceful solutions. The Galactic Council watched from a distance. The quarantine zone remained in place, but it slowly became less about fear and more about respect. Humans had shown the galaxy that they could be terrifying in war. Now they were showing that they could be extraordinary in peace. 100 years after the war ended, a new generation of humans had grown up who had never known the conflict except through history lessons. They visited the memorials. They learned the names. They studied what had happened, and they carried forward the lesson. On the centennial anniversary of the ceasefire, a massive gathering was held on Earth. Every human world sent representatives. The Galactic Council sent observers, and the archivists came to record it all. A young woman named Na, the great-granddaughter of refugees saved by S Network, gave a speech that was broadcast across all human space and beyond. 100 years ago, humans fought the most destructive war in our history, she said. We killed each other by the billions. We poisoned our own worlds. We showed the galaxy how dangerous we could be. But we also showed something else. We showed that we could stop. We showed that we could learn. We showed that we could change. She paused, looking out at the massive crowd. The archivists warned the galaxy about us. They said we were dangerous. They were right. We are dangerous, but we're also capable of great things. We're capable of peace. We're capable of wisdom. We're capable of building instead of destroying. And that's what we've spent the last 100 years proving. So let this be our legacy. Not the war, but the peace that followed. Not the destruction, but the rebuilding. Not the hatred, but the forgiveness. We are humans. We are flawed. We make mistakes, but we learn from them, and we never forget. The crowd erupted in applause that echoed across the planet. Across human space, billions of people watched and nodded. They remembered. They understood. The warning had been overlooked, the price had been paid, and the lesson had been learned. The galaxy would never forget what humans had done to themselves. But more importantly, humans would never forget either. And in that remembering, in that constant vigilance against their own worst nature, they found their redemption. The archivists made a final entry in their records. Humanity nearly destroyed itself. But in surviving, in learning, in remembering, they became something new, not perfect, never perfect, but better. And perhaps that is the most human thing of all.